Dr. Kapoor, you may share your screen and we will start it formally.
Sure.
So very good afternoon to everyone and welcome back to the 10th webinar of Evidence-Based Policy and Action Roundtable series. Today's webinar is titled Competitiveness Roadmap for India at 100, Vision for Rural Development. Our webinar will focus on the inequality question in India and what are the key challenges for rural development policies to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2047. We are very enthused to have Dr. Amit Kapoor, who is the Honorary Chairman at Institute for Competitiveness, India, and visiting lecturer of Stanford University. Dr. Amit will draw from a synopsis of around 150 research papers, and he will comment on India's competitiveness and recommendations for a comprehensive growth strategy for India till 2047. Before we would introduce Dr. Amit in detail, but before that, I would invite Dr. Partha to have a formal welcome address for our participants and kind of formally open the program. Dr. Partha, it's over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchira. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. If people have come, joined from outside India, and on behalf of Director General NIRDPR, Dr. G. Narendra Kumar, and on behalf of the coordinating team, I extend a warm welcome to all participants who have joined this afternoon to listen to Dr. Kapoor. And I am sure we'll have a very engaging discussion, and this topic is very important and topical because now everywhere we are talking how India will look like, what will be the development discourse of India in 2004-7 when our independent, we will celebrate our 100th independence. So with this brief remark, I request Dr. Ruchira to introduce our speaker and carry forward the discussion. Over to Dr. Ruchira.
Thank you so much, Dr. Partha. Let me introduce Dr. Kapoor to you in some detail. Dr. Amit Kapoor is Honorary Chairman at Institute for Competitiveness, India. He is the President of India Council on Competitiveness and Editor-in-Chief of The Thinkers. He is the Chair for the Social Progress Imperative and Shared Value Initiative in India. He is an affiliate faculty for the Microeconomics of Competitiveness and Value-Based Healthcare Delivery at the Institute of Strategy and Competitiveness, Harvard Business School. He is also an instructor with Harvard Business Publishing in the area of strategy, competitiveness, and business models, in addition to being a visiting faculty and lecturer at Stanford University, where he is teaching a course on rebalancing the economic systems and rethinking economics. He has been inducted into the Competitiveness Hall of Fame, which is administered by Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at Harvard Business School, in addition to being the recipient of Ruth Green Memorial Award for writing the best case of the year by North American Case Research Association. He is the author of bestsellers such as Riding the Tiger, which he has co-authored with Wilfred Orber, and The Age of Awakening, the Story of Indian Economy Since Independence, which is published by the Penguin Random House. His recent book, Disrupting Democracies, has been published by the Bertelsmann Foundation. He is also a columnist with Economic Times, Business World, and in addition, his contributions have been published by Harvard Business Review Online, Economic Times, The Hindu, Business Insider, Hindu Business Line, Mint, Financial Express, and so on. He has written over 600 opinion pieces in different forums and different places, and as well as academic research such as case reports and articles. Based on his work, 3 awards have been devised and constituted within the country. First is the State Competitiveness Awards, wherein the Chief Ministers are awarded, then City Competitiveness Awards, where the city heads are awarded, and Strategy Awards, wherein corporates are awarded for their strategic acumen. He chairs the jury and curates Porter Prize, in addition to curating events like National Competitiveness Forum, Shared Value Summit, Thinkers 50, etc. As for his interest in entrepreneurship, he is a keen investor and has funded enterprises like Metal, Soul Ace, Deptron Labs, Business World, etc. You can follow him in Twitter and follow his handle @Kautilya, and also contact him at amit.kapoor@competitiveness.in. Dr. Kapoor, we are having these webinars regularly on different areas of sustainable development goals, trying to structure and write a rural development policy in the future. So far, we have had webinars in 8 different SDG areas. Today, we have come to the area of inequality and the poverty SDG. And out of your report, I have also gone through it. I'll just quickly show it to the audience here. This is the report that I'm talking about. Of course, it's available online. You can go through it. It's a very well done, very thoroughly written report and extremely well analyzed. And out of the report, I would request Dr. Kapoor to kind of focus on the shared prosperity challenge when he's presenting today and on the rural development area. So with that, I would like to hand over it to you, Dr. Kapoor. You may start. And thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruchira. Just wanted to do one very quick sound check. I hope I'm audible fairly well.
Yes, yes, you are audible.
So thank you, Ruchira. Thanks a lot for this opportunity for sharing some of my ideas on the idea of India at 100. And of course, as you saw it in the report, this whole idea of building a roadmap emerged from the meeting that Michael Porter had with the Honorable Prime Minister, and we actually envisaged that, or we thought that we should write this document. That is what we have done. It took us close to about 12 to 18 months to really do this work. What I'm going to do as part of my talk is that I'll share the broad idea of what we see India as. So some idea of diagnostics, some bits on inequality, and what India needs to do as it actually moves forward. So fairly quickly, if you really look at it, as I said, what was the ambition? So the idea was to really see how India can actually realize its economic growth ambitions and really see what kind of policy imperatives or what kind of policy actions need to be taken. And the framework, just as a quick thing, in terms of the framework that we actually used, we used the Porterian view to the world in terms of understanding as to how countries can actually be successful. Eventually, at the end of the day, what matters is productivity. How is it that our labor is productive, or how well we are able to do things with our resources is a key critical question. So when I say productivity, it would mean that per capita income of people has to be pushed higher. Their quality of life has to be pushed higher. So having said that, so what matters for this is there are two broad areas. One is, of course, the macroeconomic conditions that matter. Everybody. Second thing is the microeconomic conditions, wherein we talk about how clusters or how enterprises can actually do well. Because eventually, at the end of the day, what creates prosperity in a country is private enterprise. Government can actually enable a lot of things, but the private enterprise has to move forward to really create prosperity for its people. Government can actually present a lot of resources or a lot of services, but at the end of the day, product delivery, service delivery of a major kind will always have to happen through the private sector. Having said that, the other thing or the other base that we have to is the endowments that we actually have. And when we talk about endowments, the idea is to really see as to what are the resources that we have, that is land, labor, and capital. In fact, as everybody says, that India has one of the finest labor opportunities that actually exist, without a doubt. India has the largest labor pool in the country. India is going to be one of the youngest nations in the world, and this whole labor benefit, or what you would call as the demographic dividend, would actually be with us until about 2055. Having said that, when you talk about labor dividend or demographic dividend, what we are really seeing is that all the states will not really stack up at the same level. You would see certain set of states which will actually get older faster than a certain set of states. Like say Kerala will get older the fastest, but when you talk about places like Bihar and UP, they'll get older much later. So that demographic dividend would actually be spread over a period of time. Having said that, in fact, India has been a global leader in sustained prosperity. Why is it that everybody wants to talk about it? Because if you really see, if there are a certain set of countries which have driven the growth in the world, then India is one of the biggest what you call icons that you can actually see. India has actually grown at a rate which is fairly exciting, close to about 7.5% over the last decade or so, especially in the last 7 to 10 years. So India has grown fairly well. Of course, we don't have to really see what has happened during COVID or whatever. COVID is an aberration across the world. It is a pandemic which had an impact on countries across the world. If you really remove that impact, then you can see that India is actually a huge driver. Incidentally, if you really look at COVID as well, if there is a country which has been able to sustain the pressures because of the resilient systems that we've actually had, it is our country which has done well. But in terms of, say, the aspiration that we have, the aspiration is that India has to move towards a middle income country over a period of time, or middle income and beyond. And the expectation in 2047 is that India would actually be a high income country. And this is where I would like to say something very, very important. A lot of people tend to believe that when you say high income country, it is just about per capita income. No, this is absolutely wrong. Because what we are saying is, as a country becomes high income country, you would also see huge benefits or huge transition in quality of life of its citizens. Because if you really look at developed world, what is the developed world today? When you talk about countries like Norway or Sweden or whatever, these are the countries which present a fairly robust social infrastructure as well. So when countries progress over a period of time, per capita incomes rise, the social quality or the social quality of infrastructure rises as well. And that is what we anticipate as India moves ahead. If the last 10 years, or especially the last 7 to 8 years, are anything to see by or go by, then India has actually improved the finest on the quality of life parameters over a period of time. I will share those numbers as we go along. But now, if you really talk about it, what is the hill to climb for us? What are the challenges that India actually faces today? And the challenges that India faces today are, if I would rather say that there are four big ideas that we have to look at. One is the shared prosperity challenge. And when you talk about the shared prosperity challenge, the challenge that we are really talking about, and everybody keeps on talking about within the country and across the world, is that India has huge levels of disparity. So again, the question is, how do we create a situation wherein we are able to take the benefits of growth to everybody across the country? There are two ways in which you can actually do it. Government has done exceedingly well in terms of really picking up the social infrastructure. But if you really look at the other thing is in terms of saying as to how jobs can actually get created. So there is a job challenge that we actually see within the country. But when you talk about job challenges in terms of quality of jobs, not that we have massive rates of unemployment or whatever. When I say the job challenge, what I'm really saying is that how do we uptick the quality of jobs? How do we really make sure that people get higher productivity and higher wages over a period of time? Because when you really talk about a country growing over a period of time, then you have to see that the wages also increase over a period of time. And wages do not, and I'm not saying that you have to increase higher wages or improve wages just by giving higher salaries. It has to improve with productivity of enterprises as we go along. One of the other challenges that we really see is the policy implementation challenge. India has done exceedingly well over a period of time, but it does face a policy implementation challenge because of the way the country is structured. But I'll go ahead and talk about it as we go along. And this last but not the least is the global winds of change. There are changes across the globe that we are seeing right now, which have actually had a huge impact on India, positively and negatively. When I say, if you really look at the Ukraine crisis that has actually happened, the Ukraine-Russia crisis, it's a crisis for the world because it is actually going to have inflationary pressures across the world. India has done an exceedingly good job of really getting oil from Russia. So you have really been able to deflate a certain level of inflationary pressure that could have actually happened. We are maintaining our food security and things, but these are the changes that are happening. Pandemic is another one that has happened. And then pandemic was also creating a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge was that how global supply chains will work, and the opportunity is that how India can actually be part of those global supply chains. And there is an opportunity. So as you know, like our Honorable Prime Minister has said many times, and he has said that, you have to look at glass as half full or half empty. And he always says that it is always about half full, and what is it that we are able to do more to really fill it up. And this is where we have to move forward with. The shared prosperity challenge as well. If you compare India across the world, and I'll try to dig deeper into these numbers, on prosperity, India has actually done not so well in comparison to the per capita incomes. And if you really, when I say per capita incomes, like Absolutely. We are the fifth largest country in the world in terms of economic size, but on GDP per capita, we are on the wrong side of 100. So we are about 110, 111 on that level. So, but the question here is that how do we really move into a direction where per capita incomes rise over a period of time? The second is the social progress thing. India does exceedingly well on basic human needs and foundations for well-being on certain sections. But what we are really seeing is that the challenge that we were really talking about, the jobs challenge, the opportunity challenge, that is where India actually has a little bit of a lag that we are actually seeing. But when you talk about this lag, there within in itself, there is an opportunity that India can actually look at. But again, as we were talking about inequality, I thought we should bring in some numbers. We did the income and equality report with the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. We had presented it to them, and we found something very interesting. And that was that if you are actually having something like 25,000 rupees as your income per month, you come within the top 10% of the country. So what we are really seeing here is that if you make something like 300,000 rupees, then you would be in top 10% of the country. This is where what we have to see is how do we move next over a period of time. And if you really look at the numbers, like we do know that there is a lot of wealth that actually is there within the country, but we have the disparity question that actually arises. And how do we remove the disparity through enterprise creation and through the right sizing of firms to really creating opportunities for people to really push entrepreneurship and so forth. Then, of course, another positive, which I see is really happening within the country is, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, and if you really look at the PLFS data, what we notice is that the female labor force participation is rising. It has risen from 23% to 30% in the last 4 years or 3 years. This is exceptional. I think if there is one country which has seen the pace of change on labor force participation and female labor force participation, it is India. You can always argue, and there would always be arguments from people in terms of saying COVID, it forced people to really work and so on and so forth. But what I'm saying here is that this is also a big change that we are seeing, that people are getting into the workforce and there is a positive uptake on that. So we are seeing female labor force participation rising, so that inequality that actually existed at the male-female labor force participation is also diminishing over a period of time. We have a long way to go, without a doubt, but still we are changing. And then as we really look at it, the job challenges that if you really look at the employees as share of working age population in India, we are seeing that there is a certain shift that has happened. So there is also this issue of what you would call and so on and so forth that we'll have to tackle over a period of time. But as we really talk about economic performance and shared prosperity challenge, we have to look at something very important, and that is that how states are performing. What we see in India is that there are a certain set of states which perform exceedingly well. Especially there are about 8 states which perform very, very well. And then there is a lag that actually, or there are a certain states which have actually left behind, or they are not really growing at that same momentum as the country has actually seen over the last few decades. So if you really, the answer is very obvious. The states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, these are the states which have actually done very, very well. And we have seen a lot of shift or improvement in states like UP and Bihar, but they are actually at a low base level in terms of their aggregated economic impact or per capita incomes that we are seeing. So the shared prosperity challenge would be that how do we actually find a way that the disparity between the states also reduce over a period of time. In terms of, say, the disparity within the states, like if you really look at the per capita incomes, the per capita income for a place like Bihar would be close to about 25,000 rupees, and per capita income for a place like Goa is close to about 300,000 or over that kind of money. So what we are seeing is that there is a shift, or there is a disparity that exists. We have to overcome that. Again, we also have to understand that there are coastal states which will do better because of the opportunities that exports provide. The landlocked states will have a different trajectory of growth. Having said that, we need to create strategies or we need to create policies which are closer to what the reality of that is. And we will have to really move into that direction and move forward. But then again, on the shared prosperity challenge, this is how India looks like. So bottom 300 and so if you really look at it, this gives you some very interesting set of statistics. If you really look at the top 10 districts, the top 70 districts, it actually is 10% of all employees. But when I'm saying this is again, I'm talking from a income generation point of view. So the top 70 districts employs 10% of people, but it generates close to about 70% of the money or 80% of the money that happens. In fact, the top 100 districts in the country export close to about 80% of India's exports. So that is a very interesting number. In fact, you would know that the top two states, that is the state of Gujarat and Maharashtra, contribute close to about 40% 30% of India's GDP, even in today's parlance. So that means there is that whole growth skew that we are actually seeing over a period of time. But again, this is something very interesting on share of employment across sectors. What you would see is that percentage of urban employed and rural employed. So this graph gives you something very interesting, and that is that India still is a rural country. And the numbers are there for us to see. 70% of Indians, even today, close to about 67-68% of Indians live within the rural areas. And now the question is that what do we do for the rural regions so that we are able to move forward? There are states which have done some exceptional work around it, something like, say, ODOP. ODOP is a great example of what should drive India. Because if I'm able to identify what is happening within the states and or within the certain set of and identify the products and really propel them and push them, that means we are able to create those set of clusters over a period of time and really push the prosperity idea forward. It is like this, like if you really look at a state like Bihar and you have a place called Bhagalpur, which at one point in time used to make the finest silk in the world. And for an industry which is now really at a lower ebb, we can actually revive it. So ODOP is a right step and a right directional thing that we are really looking at. But again, so concentration of population in rural or urban sectors or districts. So this is what we see here is that India is very, very rural, even dominant. When I say rural dominant, that means where rural population is higher within those districts. So you would just see that there are some city locations which you will see are very highly urbanized, but predominantly districts are still rural. So that means there are opportunities which have to get created within the rural segment. And then this is something, again, very interesting in terms of going deeper into the data. What you would find is that the rural urban average wage that you're seeing is something very interesting. So in terms of, say, the wages that you're seeing is that the wages are lower in the rural areas as of today than the urban areas. How do we overcome this challenge per se? Because can we create a situation, when I'm saying situation in a positive way, that people will want to stay within their places itself? Can we create economic activity which is equally well paying, and then so that people do not migrate to the cities? I'm not saying that migration to cities is wrong or whatever. Cities create opportunities, they do provide opportunities, but given the size of India's population, you will have to create alternate centers which have to actually do very well over a period of time. So again, as I said, ODOP is one of those directional things that we are seeing. And then, of course, contribution to payroll of traded cluster from sectors. What you would really see is that rural areas dominate. If you really look at the third graph on the right, that is where you will notice that it is the agriculture-dominated industries which are giving a lot of opportunities to people in the rural areas. But now the question is, this is where the opportunity lies. Can we create food processing as a great opportunity in these areas? There is so much that can actually happen there around those industries and create value addition imperatives, and people can actually do well as they move along. And of course, I'll not share some of this data, I'll share the slides with you, but what I'm really trying to say here is that share of employment by sector, you would notice that forestry has rural workers and things. And if you really look at aerospace, by the nature of the industry, you would always find urban workers or people living in urban areas out here. So this is very natural in terms of how industries really get agglomerated, because technical industries will always cities and non-technical industries. When I say technical, meaning not IT. Technical would mean like high technology things, because we have to fundamentally understand that there is nothing like a high tech or a low tech industry. It is always about high tech firms or low tech firms, because even rural can actually be high tech. Oh, sorry, even agriculture can be high tech as you go along, because you can use a lot of technologies out there. In fact, one of the most interesting countries which have actually used a lot of technology in agriculture is Israel, and how can we learn from it to improve our productivity is a very important question for us to answer. Because India has always been the food basket for a lot of people across the world. But now the question is that how do we improve our productivity over a period of time? Can we create that second level of green revolution to really move forward? Today, India has that huge opportunity to really move forward with the kind of endowments that we have. India is countries which can drive agriculture and food processing over a period of time. We kind of ignore it because a lot of people tend to think, oh, it is not exciting. It is one of the most exciting industries to really see. Incidentally, the world's largest firms have always started as food enterprises, and a lot of people tend to ignore that. Uh, so if you really look at the policy implementation challenge was another thing that we have to talk about. And on the policy implementation challenge, what we have seen is that India has done an exceedingly great job in terms of like how it opened up in 1991. We have done a lot of work, especially post 2014, in terms of efforts to enhance skill and infrastructure. What we have seen in infrastructure development over the last 8 years is something exceptional. But now the question is that how do we create better implementation? Because I feel that the capacity to implement actually is low here within the country. And when I'm saying capacity to implement, it does not mean that the government is incapable. What it also points out to is that government is understaffed. So at points in time, I do feel that there is a lot of opportunity for people to really come and work with the government and really create those opportunities per se. Having said that, so if you really look at it, so when I'm saying something like a policy implementation challenge, what competitiveness and prosperity, we have really moved ahead over a period of time. India has, from a competitiveness viewpoint, India has done very, very well. Our rankings have improved. It is one of the attractive destinations in the world. But now the question is that how do we translate it to what we really want to push for the people? But global winds of change, I did say that there are changes that are happening. One of the biggest challenges that India would actually face over a period of time, and that is going to be faced equally by the world, and which would have an impact on SDGs, is effectively climate change. And when we talk about climate change, and we are already seeing the impacts of climate change in a certain way with the kind of rainfalls that we actually have, and absolute tremendous downpours in a few hours, and it actually just stalls the whole process. In fact, a lot of people would tend to say that our infrastructure is not right. I always retort back to them and say that were we even aware that you would actually have 200 millimeter of rain in one single day in a certain city? It never used to happen about 40 years back. It happens now. So that climate change is there. In fact, the other aspect of climate change is that when the rivers are also facing a lot of challenge. So how do we really create a situation wherein that when rivers are drying out, how do we take water or basic resources or basic infrastructural things to our villages and things? Because the Indo-Gigantic Plain is housing close to about 600 million people. So now the question is that how do we prepare ourselves? So this is where the opportunity also rises. So within the climate change challenge is the biggest opportunity that India actually has. Quite interestingly, the Prime Minister recently gave a very interesting idea called lifestyle for environment. So how does India actually change itself? Like there is some huge cultural learning that we have within ourselves. And like we were always a very climate friendly society. And how do we imbibe those principles much deeper and ingrain them much deeper in our life and really push it to the world is going to be one of the things. So India can also, so this is where that whole idea of soft power also comes in, that how India really pushes it. Having said that, there are things like Asia rising, digitization. India has done exceedingly well in digitization, and this has had a huge impact in the rural areas itself. When you talk about digitization, if you really look at UPI, UPI has been a transformational thing across the country. In fact, the whole idea of JAM Trinity, Jandhan Aadhaar Mobile, is a transformational thing that the government has looked at over a period of time, and it was all done on the basis of on the base level of digitization that we have seen. But then again, what are the opportunities for India? These kind of look like what you call as urban dominant opportunity, but no. In fact, if you really look at renewable energy, and that's a very rural opportunity as well. In fact, like I would like to go back to that whole idea of the Gandhian view of things, wherein he had actually said that how do we make, where the Mahatma Gandhi had said, how do we make our villages resilient enough to sustain on their own? And those possibilities exist in the country today as well. So, and I see that there is that movement to really making sure that our cities become self-reliant, our districts become self-reliant and things. And of course, that Atmanirbharta is the bigger question that we are really looking at. But what is the roadmap for better growth? This is where we have to look at, say, new development principles. But this is where we are saying that there are four broad principles that we have to look at. One is that social, economic growth that is matched by social progress. Because if we have economic growth, we will also move into the trajectory of higher social progress, or what I call as higher quality of life. India has looked at that improving quality of life. I would like to share some graphs hereafter on quality of life that India has tremendously improved over a period of time across districts. The second thing is shared, how economic opportunities can be shared, sustainable, and how we create resilient systems within the country. In fact, resilience is something that India has shown during the times of the pandemic. If you really look at it, especially the times of the pandemic, if there was one economy which was least affected by the pandemic, India was one of them. The initial shock was, of course, there because we had to close down, but the re-emergence from that pandemic was actually the best for our country. So India has that basic structure for resilient systems, but how do we strengthen it over a period of time? Because this is not the last pandemic that the world is facing. You will see many more. Is it a 100-year cycle or is it a 10-year cycle? Nobody knows as to how pandemics get created or how they happen. But what I'm saying is that you'll have to really look at these resilient structures over a period of time and move forward. So the question is going to be that how do we create more competitive jobs, and what is it that we can actually do for low-skilled labor? Like we've always looked at this opportunity in terms of saying that everybody should be an engineer or whatever. No, we have some very smart people who can actually get into vocational activities and they can really move forward on that. So when you really talk about these things, I would rather say that there are certain sectors wherein we can actually look at low-skilled workers and women really getting much more embedded over a period of time. And these are something like construction, education, textile, agriculture, and even healthcare. Healthcare is one of the biggest opportunities that actually exists for India. When you talk about healthcare, if I am able to take healthcare to the masses, wherein I'm able to take it to each district, look at the opportunities that actually exist for a country like India. And this is a very important thing. One of the other things is about tourism. Tourism has one of the biggest multipliers of creation of jobs. A very interesting example, in fact, is Kevadia. I'm sure all of you know the Statue of Unity, Kevadia project and everything. It is one, again, a very interesting project in terms of the multiplier it actually creates. There was a lot of criticism in the past, which I was actually surprised by. I do get surprised at a certain level of criticism that happens. Oh, that why should Statue of Unity have happened, or why should we really invest in Kevadia, because there is 3,000 crores that have actually got invested there. In fact, that is just not the right way of looking at it, because what you need to see is that what that 3,000 crores does to that economy, because the multiplier effect of direct, indirect, and induced impact that actually happens because of that is tremendous. It actually has an impact at the local level. It has impact at the adjoining level as well. So that is what we are seeing over a period of time. And then, of course, if you really look at the national value proposition, uh, what is it that we need to look at? Demographics that drive growth. And we can actually look at our existing strengths and move forward on that. And that is where the quality of people is a thing. And then, of course, we can improve as we can increase the momentum as we move forward. I'll not take more than 5 more minutes. I know my time's getting up. But very quickly, if you really look at it, we have to understand location specific growth strategies. And when I say that, aspirational district program is a very interesting example of what location specific strategies can be from either economic viewpoint or even social viewpoint. If you really look at the 112 aspirational districts, we did the study or part of this work itself, wherein we found that aspirational districts have actually done exceedingly well in terms of fulfilling the basic infrastructure or basic needs of its citizens. And those districts have improved tremendously. In fact, today, I think there are at least 50 of those districts which cannot be called aspirational districts because they've achieved so much. Now, there are other districts which have actually become laggards, and now that whole process has become institutionalized. So we can look at the other set of 100 districts which can actually get pushed forward and move forward. In fact, let me give you an example. There used to be a district, or there is a district called Dang, which was fairly in Gujarat, which was a fairly weak district. But now what you see is it has become a very strong, resilient district over a period of time and moved forward. So location-specific jobs can actually be looked at, or those are the things that can be looked at. But as we move along, what is it that we need to do? If you really want to enable, and this is the futuristic idea, and one of the futuristic, there are two things or three things which we need to fundamentally look at. One is that we have to look at improving the quality for our people at the level of children. The second thing is about how we improve our healthcare systems across the country and tackle public safety. How do we make things easier for women across the country? We need to really see that women feel much safer and things. So this is one of the challenges and these create opportunities per se in itself as we move forward. And then of course, strengthening effective markets, agriculture, how we can really move towards productivity, how we can improve our educational system and educational outcomes. Today, if you really look at it, education is one of the biggest opportunities. And what COVID did tell us is that technology can actually be used to really taking quality education to our students across different sets of locations, whether cities or villages or whatever. Of course, once our basic technology infrastructure improves over a period of time, this would also become a lot easier as we go along. But having said that, the other thing is that how do we strengthen our federalism? Like how do states, because states will have to do more. When you talk about what we do find is that the central government has a very strong vision in terms of what they need to do, but now it is a question of what states and how states can actually get aligned to it and really move forward, because each of the states should actually know what it needs to do, what industry it should focus on, what districts it should actually look at, and start looking at it, because heterogeneity of India is in itself an opportunity. In fact, I started with ODOP. ODOP is a one great example of heterogeneity, and in that heterogeneity lies the biggest opportunity for India. And if you really look at it, these are the last few set of slides which I thought I should share with you, and on ease of living, as to how India has actually done ease of living. In fact, this is a district level work wherein we wanted to understand how India takes care of its people on basic needs, elements of welfare, and scope of human betterment. What we see is that a lot of districts, almost 55% of Indian districts have improved or are above the national average on quality of life or ease of living. So when you talk about ease of living that we have seen, India has improved quite significantly over a period of time. So if you really look at it, all these green districts are the set of districts where the ease of living is very high, and that is done through government interventions and things. Like a very simple thing like, say, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has had a huge impact on ease of living. How it changes the quality of life of, say, the girl child, how it enables her to go to school. Why am I really talking about this is that this is one of the biggest challenges that India actually does see within the rural areas. And we have seen this whole huge shift. Of course, if you really look at it, this is how districts are. Like the top 100 districts, they're all spread across the country. And the bottom 100, of course, like these are the challenging districts, the red ones. So maybe these are the districts which could be the aspirational districts now and move forward with. But again, so like this is a very powerful slide. What we have seen in the last years is, or the last 8 to 10 years is, that India has actually improved on basic needs in the tremendous way, in exceedingly tremendous way. If you really look at it, today on basic needs, India actually has the highest or the best thing that we have been able to cover at least 60 to 70% of the districts within the country. And now we have to really move forward with the other districts. And this is a similar thing on elements of welfare. And when you say elements of welfare, the question is that how we are supporting our people. And whether it is through some governmental insurance scheme or whatever, what you're seeing is that the coverage is exceptional. Because a lot of people would always say food security is one thing which would, or health security is one thing that is required because it will push people into poverty. But today, with the process that we have created, we are able to actually manage a way where people are not really getting pushed back into poverty. But there, of course, but remember, COVID is a special circumstances. So it has had a challenge, it has created that challenge, but I think we will still be able to emerge over a period of time. And this is the same thing on scope of human betterment. This is one thing where, again, this takes us to that important question of job challenge. That these are the districts where jobs will have to get created, and how do we really look at opportunities on these districts. So if you really look at it from action to roadmap, what India needs to do is we need to really get the sectoral priorities right, locational priorities right. We need to create a structures wherein we are able to identify the opportunities across districts and move forward on that. And of course, it has to be ambitious, wherein we are talking about that 4S framework that we talked about, or we talk about the SDG-based ambitions. That is what India will have to look at as we move forward. And that is the exact dimension, as I would say, should be seen for rural areas. In fact, if somebody asks me what is it that is going to drive India in the future, it is not the cities. It is going to be the rural opportunities that will drive India into the future, because there is a whole huge possibility that exists. And the world needs us to be successful, because it is for the betterment of the world. And I would like to make a political statement here. The world cannot afford to have a dominant China because of the way it is structured and the way it behaves. India is a far more, docile, for lack of a better word, it's a far more decent republic than China. India does not have any territorial ambitions or whatever. But what our ambition is, that how do we make lives better for our people? How do we create opportunities for our people? And how do we create stronger democratic processes? India has a very strong, resilient democracy, which is going to be a great balancing force in the world. So thank you. This is what I really wanted to share. Ruchira ji, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kapoor. I must say that I have been reading this report, quite, with interest, and I'm your avid student. I don't agree with you in a few points. I'll come to those things, like the questions when we open. But before we go into the question and answer and open the panel, we have Dr. G. Narendra Kumar, the Director General of NIRD PR, with us. Sir, I would really like to invite you to make a comment and kind of bind the discussion together, and then we can open it for question and answer. Sir, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Ruchira and Professor Kapoor. I was supposed to give a welcome address, but unfortunately got delayed in policy discussion on rural development policy for India. But surprisingly, we don't have a rural development policy in India 75 years down the line. And this is what we were trying to discuss with the former Secretary of Rural Development, and I got held up with that. So in National Institute of Rural Development here, we support the ministries of rural development and Panchayat Raj, primarily other ministries of the Government of India. We function as a think tank for these ministries and help improve the existing programs and come up with new programs in line with rural development needs. And our vision is to broadly work towards improvement in the quality of life of rural citizens through creation of better employment opportunities, through dealing with the ultra poor and helping raise their income, and so on and so forth, including improving the infrastructure towards improving the quality of life. What I'd like to do now is to to present before you briefly my understanding from a rural development perspective of the India Competitiveness Report, which Professor Kapoor was good enough to present to us, and also will add on some of the things that I think India should be doing. I would present this by way of a SWOT analysis, what India's strengths are, what our weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is sort of a very top of my head type of thinking. As Professor Kapoor was speaking, I jotted down some points and I'm presenting these to you. So obviously they are not very systematic. So one of the key things, as Professor Kapoor has been mentioning, is the demographic dividend of India. But the problem with this is that we've been speaking about it past 30 years and it's fast running out. The estimates are by 2050 or so, we would be through our demographic dividend. In these 30 years, we could not make much use of our demographic dividend. We've upped our skill base, we have moved up the skill ladder, we're having a number of skill development programs. But the original vision that was there is India has a very young population. We can skill these youth and help them serve the needs of the developed countries which are aging. There we've not been able to do very well, and we need to move forward. And the next greatest strength of India is its very population, which was earlier thought to be a drag on development. We need to go for family planning, reduce our population. Now that itself is a great strength in terms of the huge market that it provides. So we don't have to really look outside, because in a world that is increasingly less dependent upon exports and export-driven growth, it'll be good to focus on the large domestic market that this huge population entails. The other thing that is strong about India compared to many other Western countries and developed countries is its strong natural resource base, including the abundant solar power that we have, potential that we have. We got so much of solar irradiation. All of substantial amount of it, if it's converted into solar power, our dependence on oil products imports will substantially decrease, and the entire geopolitics could change around this. So we need to have a strong thrust and drive in that direction to make use of what God has given and endowed this country with abundance of solar irradiation, convert it into energy. Other strength that this country has seen a good integration across the states. We've been able to put together institutions, but some of them are eroding and we need to recast them or we need to reinforce them. Among the institutions, especially in the rural development sector, the stronger institutions are the Panchayati Raj institutions. I will not say stronger, but the noteworthy institutions are Panchayati Raj institutions. The self-help groups, which there are 80 lakh self-help groups in this country, 80 lakh. And there are about 8 crore members in these self-help groups, all of them well federated, well structured, waiting for economic opportunities, waiting for things to happen for their economic empowerment and betterment. So how can we use this huge mass of well-structured organizations which are spread down to the village level? Then of late, we've had a lot of successes with project-based programs such as Swachh Bharat Mission, Jal Jeevan Mission. We've done well on them. Even Jal Jeevan Mission, we're moving forward and we're doing quite well. But there continue to be some nagging problems with the structuring of these programs. There seem to be congenital defects, so to say, with the structuring of these programs, which we need to think through. Among the weaknesses that India has, as Professor Kapoor was mentioning, one of increasing inequality. So we need to definitely address this for the long-term gain and benefit of the country and for uniformly spreading the shared prosperity, as he called it. So this calls for urgent attention and systematic efforts to make this happen. The other key weakness that India has suffered is the structural weaknesses. Structural weaknesses in India include deficiencies in the constitution itself, the system of intergovernmental transfers that we have in this country, the Panchayati Raj institutions, the way they're structured, the local government institutions, the way they're structured, and the lack of devolution of powers, and so on. So all these issues are structural weaknesses. Then the cost equations which are there, socioeconomic disparities which are there. And unless those are corrected, we cannot have the shared prosperity to reach all segments of society easily. So these are some things that we need to think about. Other key weakness in this country, as I was mentioning, is that of the institutions. We built institutions, and I won't say that the institutions that we built in the country are the best in the world, but they were reasonably strong institutions. But unfortunately, even those institutions that we built, they are getting eroded. The strength of the institutions are getting eroded. And like this committee, the report mentioned, that we need to focus upon judicial reforms. We need to see that the greater amount of judicial accountability needs to come in. All these aspects need to be focused upon. And I fully endorse the observation of this report that we need to enhance capacities in the government, capacities across the board, be it in the private sector or be it in the public sector. This is a key deficiency in the country. If we are to pick one weakness of this country, the major weakness of this country is the capacities. And capacities in the government. That's why, of course, the Honorable Prime Minister has this great vision of enhancing the capacities. First time, he has come up with the Capacity Building Commission to work on capacity enhancement across the board, devising competencies at the central government level, state government level, and local level. So there would be a different set of competencies and a coherent set of competencies from the central government level up to the local government level. So this is something that we need to urgently work upon. All these years of independence, we've not been able to have strong capacities in the government. And the evidence is there for us to see where the governmental systems are strong, capacities are strong. Sometimes capacities are strong because of the strong systems, such as state of Tamil Nadu. Anecdotally, we can say, irrespective of the kind of government it comes, that state delivers. And because the system in the state is such, the capacities in the state are such that they will deliver. So such like capacities need to be built in the system. I'm not saying that that's the best practice, that's a good example. I'm just trying to talk about a state with good capacity, how it can deliver well. Other key weakness, if I have to pick the second strong weakness of the country, which needs to be urgently enforced, is the higher education system in this country. This higher education system has really let down the entire citizenry. Because, as they say, I was Secretary of Higher Education in Delhi, where we set up 4 leading universities. One of the professors, leading directors of our higher education institution, mentioned the difference about the US education system and Indian education system. So what they mentioned in India, we get the best students at the class 10 and class 12 level. They're highly competitive, go for the IIT tests, then go for the IIMs and so on and move forward. And once they enter the IITs, they're brought one step down. Once they go to come to the IIM or university, you brought one step further down. Whereas in a US education system, they start weaker at the 10th class and 12th class compared to India, but they start moving up from undergraduation to the master's level and so on. So the Indian higher education system really brings people down in comparative terms and comparative competences. And that's where we need to reinforce. And here I speak about an example of rural development and Panchayat Raj sector, in which the central and state governments combinedly invest 4 lakh crore rupees every year. We don't have a skilled cadre of rural development and Panchayat Raj managers to this day in 75 years of independence. Our higher education system did not think it fit that in spite of this huge amount of investment, we need to create a professional cadre of experts who can manage these rural development and Panchayat Raj sectors well. Such is the weakness in other sectors also. Wherever the higher education has done well, the industry has grown well, the private sector has grown well, the country has done well. For instance, the IT sector, why has it grown around Bangalore? Mainly because of presence of one institution, the Indian Institute of Science, which is a pioneer in developing IT protocols and systems. From that, the private institutions grew. And then on, the IT sector got spurred on in Bangalore, and from there it grew all over the country. Similarly, pharmaceutical sector, Hyderabad is strong in this because of the strong chemistry background of institutions here. The Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, the universities here, and the initial industry entrepreneurs in pharmaceutical sector who came up, who spurred on others who came in that channel, and then they diversified, they grew on their own. And like that, the higher education systems had a very strong role in spurring innovation and growth of industry. So unless we are strong in the higher education system, these came by default, just fortuitously these two industries came up, IT and pharmaceutical industry, not by design. It just so happened. But we can do this in almost every sector of this country if we strengthen our higher education system. So if there's one thing that we need to pick up to develop India, it's this higher education system. If we have a good, strong, robust higher education system, which is globally competitive, we will make it. We don't have to think about anything else. Everything else will fall in place. So that's something that we need to focus upon. Then in terms of the threats, one issue which Professor Kapoor was mentioning, climate change. India is in the cusp of climate change and the grip of it, and we need to find ways and means of urgently dealing with this, paying for sins of other countries, of the developed countries. But nevertheless, we have to brace up to it, and we have to mitigate and adapt to the climate change, which we are doing, but we need to do this more urgently. Other key threat in the country is one of political populism. A lot of countries, a lot of states, the leadership is taking to populistic means to come back to power. So they believe that the populism brings them back to power. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's the belief in which they proceed and progress. So we need to find some solution. I don't know what it could be, that an elected government itself indulges in populism and fritters away all the public money. So what solution there can be, something that we need to celebrate. Other key thing is the poor quality of politicians, I would say, that we have in this country, because the well-educated people are not willing to come forward and participate in public life. They're not willing to take to elections. So what solution there can be to this is something, again, that we need to think through very carefully. On the opportunities front, India is now the fastest, or one of the fastest growing economy in the world. So how do we sustain this pace? And we've been growing quite substantially fast over the past decade or so, and we need to just keep up that pace and increase the pace of that development. But more importantly, we need to focus on the inclusive aspects of development. How do we see that the benefits of economic growth really reach every section of the society, including the rural society? How do we make this happen? One way of making this happen is to increasingly focus on rural industrialization. This is something that Mahatma Gandhi spoke of during the independence struggle. And today, to this day, we speak about it without much impact. So how do we make this happen? Of course, coming from a discussion I was mentioning on the rural development policy, they were mentioning that, look, in the rural areas now, out of industrial activity in the country, almost 50% is concentrated in the rural area. Does it mean that the poor segments of the rural society benefit from that kind of industrialization? Most of that rural industrialization is in peri-urban areas, closer to the urban areas, not so much in the deeper rural areas. So how do we see that industrialization spreads to the deeper industrial areas? Would those deeper industrial areas be able to take to the same kind of scale-based industrialization, or do we have to have different means of industrialization, such as a decentralized production system? Like a typical example would be, supposing you're manufacturing a chair. We have a self-help group. We encourage self-help group to make only the handles of the chair. One self-help group to only make the back. Another to make the bottom, and subsequently we assemble all that. We have an aggregator to do that. Such like innovative production technologies in the rural areas need to be thought through to be able to achieve scale, while at the same time specializing the production and producing through the impoverished self-help group women and others in the rural areas. And One key opportunity in this path is the low cost of production of goods and services that we have in India. We only need to organize our people well enough to be able to achieve scale, to be able to provide the world with competitive products and link up, of course, our products with the global markets through the various e-governance channels, the electronic channels that were e-marketing channels that we have. As I was mentioning, that we need to have innovative strategies for development, such as development of micro-enterprises, self-help group women and others in rural entrepreneurs who create a large base of them, organize them differently in a decentralized production system. Such like things need to be focused upon. Professor Kapoor was talking about telemedicine at each district. I think we need to move forward, that we have this huge mass of self-help groups. We don't have to focus at the district level, but now we can talk about medicine at the village level. And we just need the IT infrastructure, which is available now in every village. And we have to train the self-help group women to be able to operate the camera and the system and help hook up with the hospitals, bring the patient before that, create a diagnostic facility in that. We can make telemedicine available in every village of this country. Likewise, we made tremendous progress with rural connectivity through the Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana. Now almost every village of this country is linked with a motorable road. But the dichotomy is that we've not thought things through properly, because of which we don't have good public transport to make use of these good roads available. So these are some of the ways in which we can, I think, continue to make progress, understand our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And we thank Professor Kapoor for bringing out some of these aspects very well. And I think we would like to continue to hear more from him. And we in the NIRD would like to welcome him to come to our campus in Hyderabad and look to work with him and his group in the future. Thank you very much, Professor Kapoor.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really detailed and very well structured analysis that you have presented and kind of wind up the discussion. Before I open the panel for questions, just one thing. I'm going to give the, you will be able to unmute yourself after I give you the controls. It is a request to our participants that kindly raise your hand and let us unmute you. Rather than you unmuting you all at once, and you can ask your questions after that. So the panel is now open, and please raise your hand and unmute yourself. Yeah, Dr. Partha.
They can also drop question on the chat box.
Right. Yeah, you can drop the question as well. We can read it out for you. Now, before our participants are asking, Dr. Kapoor, one of the few things that I wanted to kind of ask you basically. The first thing is that you talk about women's labor force participation increasing over time. I would like to know, like, what is the time period between which you have seen this increase? Because after COVID, especially if you look at the CMIE data, there is a very clear decline of women from labor force in India. So that was my first question. And the second question is, of course, I agree with most of the things that you have written in the report, and I understand the challenges to which I agree. But the other thing is, as a public health person myself, I do not think that COVID is an aberration. And I do not think that when you are predicting growth or, measuring competitiveness, these kinds of public health threats and shocks, I don't think we can keep the model while predicting the growth. So these were just my two comments. If you could comment on that while the participants are asking their questions. Over to you.
Sure. In fact, I would just like to start with a pointer to what Dr. Kumar had said. And I think I simply cannot disagree with anything that he has said. I fully agree with whatever he has said. But I would just like to add a couple of points. One was about the idea of demographic dividend. That he said that, are we going to fritter away a demographic dividend? I think there is a danger, and the question is going to be that how do we set things right? He did talk about higher education, but I think there is an urgent need to really set our basic school education system right as well. Because if you really look at the learning outcomes that we are seeing, and especially if you really look at the NAS survey that has happened, recently, it shows that the learning outcomes have fallen. And this is a Government of India report that was just released a few weeks back. So, and there seems to be a huge COVID impact that has happened, and the experts are saying it can actually take up to 5 to 7 years for us to recover from that learning loss. So there is an urgent need or intention that is required there for higher education as well as the primary, secondary school level itself. And there is a huge multiplier that happens, and that multiplier is that for every additional year of schooling that a person does after class 8, his yearly income rises by 8,000 rupees. So that means there is a huge positive impact that education has within the country itself. So people will have to get into that education thing itself. The second thing on the self-help groups, I think it's a brilliant idea if you are able to even what I call, you said there are close to about 800,000 self-help groups. If we are able to even do something with 1/10 of them, India could actually be a transformed country. And I'll give you an example here. We did a case study. In fact, I've written a case study with Harvard Business Publishing. It is on GNFC. So on that self-help group, we studied how GNFC Neem project is a beautiful idea, wherein women from local tribal areas were asked to collect neem seeds, and their yearly incomes rose from anything between 1,10,000 rupees to 3 lakh rupees. So there is, and it was a self-help group created endeavor and whatever. So they were collecting, and then it was going to the factory, and they were creating neem oil, which was used in the urea thing as well. So what I'm saying is that these opportunities are absolutely tremendous if you're really able to do that. And I'm absolutely certain that in terms of, say, he also talked about the principle or the Mahatma Gandhi's idea of rural development or industrialization. And I did iterate in my talk as well that, like we have to go to the whole Gandhian ethos, because I think the world is going back to it in many, many ways in terms of saying, how do we understand the local reality? The idea of clusters is also about understanding local realities and moving ahead. So these are just very few comments, but coming to your point, labor force participation rate, I am talking about, I have not used any data which is from a private source. All the data that I've used is a governmental source, and I'm talking about, and again, it was driven by the idea that I'm talking to a Government of India institution. So, but having said that, I've used the labor force data, what do you call, sorry, the PLFS data on this. We have used and the PLFS data does show that the labor force, female labor force participation has risen. What you say in terms of, say, what CMIE is saying is in terms of reduction in labor force participation and things, yes, that aberration is seen because there was a huge spike in unemployment during the time of the COVID, but it has fallen equally sharply as well. But now the question is going to be that how do we reduce the unemployment that actually exists at about 7%, 8% or whatever. But I'm absolutely sure that if we are not able to improve our labor force participation for women to up towards 70% levels, India will always have a huge lag in terms of how things would happen. We will always have a distant dream of being a developed economy. So we have to find a way to really make sure that women are able to participate in the workforce. So that is where I'm coming from. In terms of public health, when I say that, I absolutely agree with you. I can't disagree with you on the point that public health systems are exceedingly important. And we need to create structures wherein we are able to, that surveillance mechanism has to be absolutely exceptional. So if we have the right surveillance mechanism, we are in a position to really stall the next set of pandemics. There is a lot of learning that has happened during the COVID period. It has also exposed some of the lacuna that we actually have, but I think it's a learning experience for a country of our size. I think India is not something which is, the impact of COVID has been there, but it is not as brutal as what the other countries have actually seen. In fact, we have just done a paper which is getting published wherein we saw that the number of lives saved through vaccination and COVID effort is close to about 3, and I'm talking about a very low number. We are just saying it is 34 lakh lives which have actually got saved because of COVID vaccination and the governmental efforts. Very small number that we are saying, and we are looking at the Lancet data. But look at the economic impact it actually has. You are effectively having an economic impact of $8 billion by lives saved per year. And if you really look at the longitudinal period of time, you're talking about 150 to 160 billion dollars worth of economic saving or economic activity generation because of the lives that we have saved. So I actually agree with you that we need to have resilient systems, and that is what exactly I've said uh, in terms of like what India needs to do: create resilient structures and things. Uh, Pandemics are there; they will, as I said, they will always happen. They will always come. We do not know how quickly they will happen. Will they happen in 5 years or 10 years? But we need to create a resilient system that exists. And in the same light, we have to also look at the idea that you can have natural disasters also. So resilience have to be a larger construct in terms of saying health, natural disasters, climate change, everything, wherein we have to create structures wherein we are resilient. Because India gets hit by so many typhoons and everything every year. Look at how Orissa gets inundated by them every year. How do we really set those things wherein we are able to create our systems intact? These are some of the points, but Ruchira, it's not a point of digression or disagreement. I think we are on the same page. It is just a question of how we are really framing it. But I fully agree with you, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kapoor. So we had a few hands raised. I have given you the controls to unmute yourself. I think there was a raised hand from Anupama, if she's still there in the meeting. I don't think she's here. If there are any questions, please raise your hand or drop your question at the chat box.
Ruchira, there is a question in the chat box.
Okay, so there's a question from Dr. S. Nagabhushana Rao. More of a comment actually. Do you think that rich people in India can make India a rich country? And how the equity and inequalities can be addressed? Can we have socialism in capitalism and humanness in richness?
So,
Could you address that, Dr. Kapoor?
no, this is a beautiful comment and a philosophical comment. I think, like what Mr. Rao is really saying is in terms of like, yes, without a doubt, India has a lot of accumulation of wealth at the top, or whatever. Few rich people have a lot of wealth. But now the question is that how do we, the capitalistic system will always or has a tendency to move towards a direction of the rule of three, wherein the top three firms will control 60-70% of the market and all those kind of things. So can we create a system, or how do we redefine capitalism in such a way? What he's calling is a socialism, or can we create market structures wherein larger sets of enterprise are to be there? How do we create a regulatory mechanism for that is important. And in terms of say humanness and richness, the question is, and exactly to my point, we have to make sure the quality of life of our citizens is maintained. Even if India becomes rich, there would always, any country in the world will always find there are going to be a very rich segment, top 10% will be very rich, and the disparity will be there. But the question is going to be on quality of life, the difference should not exist. Each one of us, each one of our citizens has the right to the right education, right healthcare, right infrastructure, and everything. And that is what the motive should be. Can we create solutions around it? I think everybody has a right to get educated, go to the best schools, go to the best colleges, universities. Similar is about healthcare, have to be provided the best healthcare. So that is what needs to be done. We cannot create a situation wherein we distribute wealth, because that will actually kill the idea of entrepreneurship. We cannot do that as well, because entrepreneurship creates ideas and solutions for the challenges that the world sees. So that is what we have to really look at. But deeply philosophical question and a very important one for that, for India to answer and for us to answer.
If there are any other questions, okay, I hope Dr. Rao, you got your answer. Very beautifully framed and beautifully replied as well. But I don't see any raised hand here. So if there are no other questions, I would invite Dr. Partha to make a closing comment, and then maybe we can. Okay, there is another comment in the box. Let me see. Okay, so Ruma Ghosh is asking that although the labor force participation in PLFS has increased, the workforce participation rate has increased, but women are mostly concentrated in low remunerative work or self-employment or helper in household. So it's a comment that she's making, that there is a good jobs challenge. I mean, that's what he has established as well, that there is a good jobs challenge in India. It's not just jobs challenge is the quality of work. I think that has been addressed in the presentation as well. But Dr. Kapoor, if you want to add something to that, you can.
I think this is a point which we have to grapple with, the quality of jobs, as you yourself said. How do we really move forward on that? The question is going to be that we will have, and as the Director General was saying, like he made a very beautiful comment in terms of societal change. And all this will also get driven by societal change. Like people like us who are sitting in our cities, very different life. We have a very different understanding of what rural areas could actually be. So we need to bring that change in the rural areas in our thinking and really move forward to that. Yeah, so that is what I'll say. So the challenge is more from a cultural point of view, enabling women to take their decisions. I think, but if the moment we are able to give financial empowerment to women, that changes the very structure. So we have to empower women financially. When I say financially, you have to find jobs for them and really help them take their own decisions, get their lives in their own hands. That is something that is not happening in 50% of the country. And I'm sorry for saying that, but I hope you agree with me.
True. We have a raised hand from Mr. Yadagiri. You can please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, very good evening, Kapoor.
Word of caution is that we have very little time left, so please keep your question brief and please ask.
Yeah, very good evening, Dr. Kapoor and Ruchira ji. Here, sir, in the regarding high demands and implementation capacity, specifically collaboration across levels and parts of government. And this is one kind of rigidity which we are looking in the context of bureaucracy in India, from the top to bottom, or even bottom to top level. Unfortunately, there is no kind of any model or cascading model to make the collaboration, because each and everybody with the constitutional norms or maybe the set of rules and regulations, whatever it is, that the collaboration is making a lot of big problem for implementation of all the schemes and the developmental part, particularly in the bottom level. How do we overcome these kind of problems in this collaboration problem? Collaborative problem is there in the institutional system itself in the government.
Ruchira, could you
Yadagiri ji, can you please ask the question, because we kind of missed the question in your comment here. Can you please ask the question again?
I was not able to hear.
Yeah, this is the collaboration, the government parts of collaboration between the governmental institutions for implementation of various programs and policy schemes in the bottom level. There is a lacuna and rigidity still in the bureaucracy and the institutional system. How should we can overcome this?
Okay. How to overcome the collaboration gap between institutions in the government? That's what he's asking.
Yeah, so it's a very important point again, Yadagiri. And in fact, Dr. Kumar did say something very important here in terms of like how do we create structures of governance which are able to be politically independent, which are in a position to really have that resilience even if the government changes or whatever. That is one. So how do we create those structures is going to be exceedingly important for the country. How do we increase capacities of implementation in the country? Like something like railways. Let me give you an example. Railways seem to reach a limit of not being able to spend more than 40,000 crores every year. The budget could be higher, but there seems to be an implementation deficit that happens. So how do we create those structures for implementation? How do we really create a situation wherein center and state actually are thinking together in terms of achievement of goals and things? So when you say, I think it's about, and also one more thing that Dr. Kumar had actually said, like how do we really look at a system wherein empowerment of people on ground is happening? When I say on ground, how Panchayati Raj institutions can become more things. We've had that 73rd, 74th Amendment, but somehow we have not really got those implemented. So can we actually move into the direction wherein people are able to decide, local population is able to decide the what I call directionality of what we want to actually achieve. In the US, what you see is New York has his own mayor, and the mayor is very, very powerful. And the state governor has his own say. In fact, can we do that in our country as well, wherein chief ministers will devolve power to the local entities, that means to the district people or to the cities. We have seen that happen within India from, say, the office of the central government to the states. States everything is a state subject most of the time. But what about how do we really push states to really devolve power to its people? So I think it becomes more like a political thing. And how do we make sure that democratic process is strengthened over a period of time?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kapoor, for addressing that. I don't see any other. There is one more raised hand, Mr. V.V. Satyanarayana. Please unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, Dr. Ruchira, thank you so much, and very thankful to you, Kapoor sir, actually giving the very intensive and very insightful, thought-provoking presentation from the report. I'm myself, Satyanarayana. I'm pursuing my PhD in the political science. I'm working on the rural development, the main aspect of the leadership development. What is the role of the rural development in the especially Panchayat Raj system in India? So thank you. So my question is that directly, since we have a goal number 10, reducing the inequality and also leadership role. So what is the leadership role in the our competitiveness and roadmap for the India at 100? So is there any what is our way? How we will take into the sarpanches and other like mandal block mandal level and district level? How the leadership will take the role into this competitiveness at India at 100? If I'm clear, Kapoor sir.
Yeah, sure. So like when you were talking about, there is a larger overarching idea that we are saying that what India needs to do, it has to be broken down to KPIs, key performance indicators, and that each KPI will have to go to the level of district or even a ward, and that is only when things will happen. In fact, I did share some of the slides with you in terms of we have looked at the district level information in terms of understanding. So the KPIs could be on ease of living. Let's look at those 100 indicators that are important and how each district is fulfilling it. And each of the districts can actually break it down to the level of wards and moving on that. So data-based thing or whatever and assessments will have to be carried out. And I think, and this is a very big statement, but I would think all DCs or all district magistrates should get assessed in terms of like how they are improving that quality of life of people on those indicators, because they have a role and they have an important role. So some of the things that are within their ambit, they should actually get assessed or how they're improving it, because that will also bring continuity to the idea of what we need to achieve over a period of time. The idea is about continuity, not about the pet project that I have. Right? So it's the continuity for the idea for India that we need to be one of the what I call high income countries in the future. We need to have a quality of life or standard of living which is equivalent to a high income country. So we need to know where we want to go. And now each of these things should be broken down to a block level, district level, and a DM or a DC should actually get measured on that.
I hope, Satyanarayan, you got your response from Dr. Kapoor. Unfortunately, we don't have many time left. We just have 3-4 minutes left, so we will have to conclude this discussion today. But we really hope that we can continue the dialogue with Dr. Kapoor and listen more from him in more detail. And of course, as our Director General Sir said, that we have him at the campus at Hyderabad at NIRDPR. Dr. Kapoor, we are working closely with Panchayati Raj, Minister of Panchayati Raj and Minister of Rural Development in some of the areas of decentralization and localization of SDGs, where these key performance indicators are something that we are also looking at, and through the Gram Panchayat Development Plan, trying to involve the communities in planning and taking up at least the financial devolution in the village level. So there needs to be a assessment, and one needs to see how it kind of affects the development in the future. But I'm sure that we will be able to talk to you more on this and be able to do something with you together for better development of the rural India. So with that comment, I would now request Dr. Partha to make a closing comment so that we can formally close it. Partha, over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me first thank Dr. Kapoor for giving an excellent and deliberate talk on various issues which are, I think, very relevant. And on behalf of our DZ, again, I extend a welcome. Whenever you are visiting Hyderabad, please drop into our institute. And he raised diverse set of issues which are very important in our journey towards the 2047. But he beautifully knitted all those issues and tell us what kind of development narrative that we should write or we should work on. He highlighted many challenging issues, but at the same time, in our journey towards joining that middle income club, what are the silver line, what are the positive or what are the pathways on which we can focus on that. And I also thank he and his team for bringing out those two reports, Status of Inequality and the other one which Dr. Ruchira was showing, which has in fact reflect a lot of important development issues which we all should work on. And I also thank our DG, Dr. G. Narendra Kumar, who invariably attend all this webinar series and also share his thoughts, observation, and always encourage us to invite and engage all faculty member and participants on various issues related to development and how we can work towards the inclusive and rural development narrative. So I thank all participants also who not only joined and actively participated and raised important questions. Thank you very much, and over to Dr. Ruchira.
Thank you so much, Dr. Partha. So with this, we close the 10th webinar of Evidence-Based Action and Policy Roundtable series. As we are saying that, Dr. Kapoor, you will be hearing more from us. Actually, we would like to work with you, and we would, of course, write to you in some of the initiatives that we are taking. We have series of workshops and deliberations and brainstorming sessions here. We would like to involve you as well in taking some of the things forward. And other than the Delhi branch of NIRDPR, of course, we would like to have you at Hyderabad for a longer stay and more intense discussion. So with that, a very good evening to all of you, and let us meet again in the next webinar. We'll announce that and let you know the next date. Until that time, a very good evening, and thank you for joining and thank you for engaging with us. Thank you.